Chapter 8, Food Fight. Jimmy's snores woke me up not long after. I flicked on my headlamp and checked my watch. It was morning, early morning. Jimmy had 3 empty chocolate bar wrappers on the ground next to him. I frowned. We needed to ration the food, not devour it. Jimmy had had his breakfast. Now I needed to make sure everyone else got some too. I stood up, stretched, and walked back toward the infirmary. The red emergency lights kept everything lit like some kind of haunted house. The batteries in our helmets were only going to hold their charge for so long before they died. I needed to get the main lights back. There was probably a central panel or something that turned off the emergency system and rebooted the central lighting. Just needed to find it. Mandeep was asleep in the hallway outside the infirmary, wrapped in a pile of uniforms. I tiptoed past her. I heard whispered voices as I opened the infirmary door. Maria was trying to calm Darcy, who'd woken up in a panic. "I want my daddy and mommy," Darcy said, hugging Friendly so hard she was practically crushing him. Maria looked exhausted, but she was trying to soothe Darcy with cooing sounds and pats on the back. "It's okay, Isabel. Darcy." She choked up on saying the name of her little sister and had to turn away. Finn was sitting up in his bed, looking dazed. Alec was still on his side, staring blankly at the poster. Pavel was standing against the wall, his hands in his pockets, looking annoyed by the whole scene. Darcy saw me and jumped up from her bed. She rushed over, hugging my legs so hard she almost toppled me over. "Christopher, where's my family?" She pointed at Finn. "When he was sleeping, he was talking, and he said his daddy and mommy are dead." Pavel gave a snort and smirked. "Pathetic," he said. He walked past me and out the door. Finn looked shocked. I don't want to scare, Then he just shook his head, his bottom lip trembling so much he couldn't talk. "It's okay, Finn," I said. "It's okay." Maria walked over and hugged him. They held each other silently. I knelt down and looked straight into Darcy's eyes. "I know this is scary. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know where our parents are." Her lip trembled, but I continued. "That thunderstorm you heard wasn't a real storm. It was an attack. People attacked us." Darcy narrowed her eyes and frowned. "You mean like pirates?" I nodded. "Yes, I think. I'm not sure. They dropped bombs. All of us down here in the mines. We are the only ones who I'm sure are alive." Darcy hugged Friendly and took this in. "I hate them," she said at last. Then she turned and ran and tucked herself down into a corner of the room. "I hate them," she screamed. Maria and Finn continued to hold each other. Pavel was probably outside punching the walls again. Alec was comatose. Mandeep appeared at the doorway, groggy and rubbing her eyes. "I just got to sleep. Can't anyone shut up for a moment?" Then she turned back to the hallway and slammed the door. I hung my head. How was I supposed to help everyone through this? I had a hard enough time talking to people when things were normal. Elena had been different. She listened to me no matter what stupid thing I said, but Elena was dead. I had to do something. If we all sat around stewing in our own grief, we'd never survive the blackout. I walked over to Darcy. "Hey, you know what I need right now?" Darcy looked up at me and shook her head. "I need a brave girl to help me find the light switch for down here. And we need to go find some food. There's a cafeteria down the tunnel with lots of chocolate and desserts. You want first dibs?" Darcy nodded. I smiled and held out my hand. She gripped it tightly, and we walked toward the door. Finn raised his head off Maria's shoulder. "Can I come?" Finn said. I looked down at Darcy and raised an eyebrow. She nodded. "Okay," I said, "but Darcy gets first dibs on the desserts." Finn gave a quick smile and joined us, wiping his eyes and nose on his sleeve. "Maria, you want to come too?" I asked. She shook her head and crawled into the cot, pulling the sheets up over her head. Well, at least the younger kids are moving, I thought. We walked past Mandeep and Pavel, both sleeping or trying to, and headed toward the entrance to Tunnel 1. Finn was quietly humming the Hi-Ho song. Darcy noticed too and joined in. The sides of the tunnels were incredibly smooth. The ceiling arched above us about 10 feet high in an almost perfect semicircle. I marveled at this underground world. Diggers had carved out small exploration shafts with excavators following, carving out the full tunnel and then using shovel arms to grab copper, iron, whatever. For really precious metals like gold or titanium or jewels, they used something called a grinder. I'd never seen one, but I'd picked up from bits of conversation that these machines could get into small cracks and holes the bigger machines would destroy. Just beyond the entrance to the tunnel, we came to a large door with cafeteria spray painted on it. Someone with a sense of humor had added, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," in marker across the top. The door wasn't locked, and cool air greeted us as we pushed the door open and walked inside. There were more motivational posters up on the walls with slogans like "Food and water are as precious as gold," "Don't waste," and "Reuse and recycle." The fridges and freezers were still working, so that meant there had to be some emergency batteries or power cells somewhere down here. I tried the stoves, but they didn't ignite. Keeping food from spoiling was a priority. Cooking it was apparently a luxury. So it was going to be raw veggies and salads until we got some actual power down here. I turned on the tap and water flowed out. I quickly shut it off. Who knows how much clean water was left? The ponds up top were probably polluted from the battle, and I didn't want to think too much about that. As promised, Darcy got to choose first and elected for an entire chocolate custard pie. I noticed the pie had been made on Earth in a place called Brighton, Ontario. I'd never heard of it, but a pang of homesickness still hit me. Finn grabbed a chocolate bar and happily munched away. "This is what I needed," he said. "You want some?" He thrust the bar in my direction. "No, I'm good, but don't eat too much. We need to save some for the others." Finn smiled and took another bite. We completely inventoried all the food in the fridges and on the shelves. There wasn't as much as I'd hoped. Worst case scenario, we need food for 3 months. 2 until the blackout ended, and then a month or so until we got rescued. There was nowhere near enough food down here to last that long, even with rationing. Darcy grabbed another piece of pie, giggling as she pretended to share it with Friendly. Finn sat down next to her and opened yet another wrapped candy bar. The rationing could start tomorrow. My parents' voices rang in my ear. My father ordered me to be a leader, my mother telling me to run. They both wanted me to survive. That meant staying underground. It was still dark, but now we had some food. If we were lucky, we could stay put and ride out the blackout. Then we'd signal Earth and get saved. I didn't have it all worked out yet, but one thing we did have was time. Okay, guys, let's grab some veggies and head back to camp. "Aw," whined Darcy and Finn together. "And make sure you wash the evidence off your hands and faces. I don't need anyone demanding dessert before breakfast." They got up and we grabbed some food and headed back. I did stash some treats in my bag. Mandeep and Pavel were up. Jimmy had woken up too, but was still yawning as he leaned against the wall, stretching. "I'm sorry," Mandeep said as we approached. "That really wasn't like me to yell like that." "It's all good," I said. Darcy hugged Mandeep and nestled into her arms tightly. Finn and I passed out fresh beans and carrots to everyone. Alec and Maria were still sleeping, so I set theirs aside. "Beans and carrots," Pavel said, sticking out a tongue. "What, no Brussels sprouts left for dessert?" I frowned. "Look, the fresh stuff like the carrots needs to be eaten first. There's not a lot of extra anything, and we can't afford to waste. Food is like gold for us. Unless we can find some more, we have to get by with what we have." Pavel scoffed, but took a giant bite out of his carrot and sat chewing it loudly. But then I pulled out a box of chocolate bars. "If we eat our veggies, we'll get a treat." Jimmy reached out and I grabbed his hand before he could take one. "After the veggies," I said. He was ticked. "Who died and made you king?" he said under his breath. I started to say my dad when I remembered he'd lost his family too. "Never mind, sorry, just grab one." "No thanks, I don't want it anymore," Jimmy said, stomping away. I walked to the infirmary. Maria woke up and crunched on her veggies. She stared at the chocolate bar for a long time, then slid it into her pocket. It was Isabella's favorite kind, she said, but she got up and walked outside to join the others. Alec was in worse shape. I offered him chocolate and water, but the food stayed in the wrapper and the water trickled down the sides of his mouth. He just stared straight ahead, barely even blinking. 3 nights in, nothing had changed. I was on watch duty alone. I settled into a comfortable spot on the corner of the locker room and pulled out a copy of Oliver Twist. I hoped reading it might help calm me and help me remember happier times with my mom and dad and their newborn baby boy. I hadn't even cracked the spine when I heard a trickle of debris falling down the shaft of the ruined elevator. The bits panged the sides on the way down and bounced off the remains of the elevator at the bottom. I put my hands on the ground to see if there were any tremors that might have dislodged some of the rubble. Nothing. The floor was cool and calm. I stashed the book in my backpack and walked over to the elevators. More pebbles, or bits of whatever, trickled down. Then I heard a sound that sent chills down my back. One of the working elevators began to ascend back up its shaft.